The sheets that many of you have in front of you or that you're sharing with the person next to you have a lot of sources on them, and I'm just going to tell you right now, we're going to do like 2 sources. We're not going to do them all, but I wanted you to be able to see the process through which I hope we get from the beginning to the end. And I'm actually going to give you the ending before we start. And that is that what we're going to talk about today is the way in which we go on journeys. And the fact that when you plan a trip in such a way that you know where you're going, but you don't know what's going to happen there. You know what restaurant you might have a reservation at, but you don't know what you're going to eat, and you don't know that you'll enjoy it. You hope you enjoy it, I guess. But you don't know what's going to actually happen on the journey, even though you plan it. You plan for this trip. You plan for parts of your life. You plan to take steps along a real or a proverbial journey, but you don't actually know what's going to happen along the way. And what we see in our Parsha today is that part of the magic, part of the intentionality around all of these journeyings is that they were able to be present, and they also knew that they were planning for something. So we're going to talk about how we get from the prep of a journey, the getting onto an itinerary, so to speak, and then actually arriving at the destination and what that does for the meaning behind the enjoyment of the journey that you are on. Okay, so that's where we're going to end up. Now you can take a nap if you'd like, because I'm going to walk you all the way there. All right, so there are 3 different points in Parashat Maseh that I want us to look at, and I've put them on your sheet. They're on the first page. The first one is the beginning of the Parsha. Ele Maseh v'nei Yisrael asher yatzu me'eretz Mitzrayim letziv otam b'yad Moshe v'Aharon. So these are the goings out, the journeyings of the Israelites who started from the land of Egypt, troop by troop, in the charge of Moshe and Aaron, literally by the hand of Moshe and Aaron. Vayichtov Moshe et motzehem, and Moses wrote out their goings out. It says here in the English their starting points, but as we know, yatzah means to go out. So the way in which they left or they went out from a place, lemasehem, al pi Adonai ve'ele masehem lemotzehem. So he recorded these goings out of their various journeyings as directed by God. Their journeyings and it's adding in here a little bit of English by starting points were as follows, right? So this was a way of these journeys being recorded. If this was the only verse that we looked at, what would you imagine would come after this? A list of places. Great, which actually is what comes after this. But it's not just the places that they go. What else is involved for those of you who might have read Torah today or just followed along?
The stories of what happened.
Okay, so some of that, and we're going to see that in just a moment, some of the places where they stopped actually had stories associated, but what we're going to look at in a moment through a commentary is that it wasn't just the name of the place, but the name that the people gave the place. So it wasn't just, I went to La Cienega and Olympic, it was, I went to Shul, right? I went for a davening experience. I didn't just go to a location. So what Moshe was actually recording was not the locale, was not the GPS marker, but rather the experience that they had or that which happened there. Everyone understand how I'm differentiating those things? Okay. So the second cluster of verses here that we're going to look at is from one of these moments that Alan just alluded to. They set out from Kadesh, they leave from Kadesh, and they encamp at Mount Hor. And Aaron, the priest, ascends this mountain at the command of God, and he dies there. So why is it important that this piece is being told in the journey narrative? Great. So, right, he's a priest, he's a main character, he's Moshe's brother. It's good for us to know what happened to him specifically. But why is this now being mentioned in an itinerary? Right? Why is it that we need on this itinerary list, basically, that we're reading through, why is it important to us to know that this happened along the way? Yeah, Justin. Great. So Justin's saying maybe this, he's asking it as a question, I'm going to make it a statement, but does it actually name this because then we know what happens afterwards? Not in this particular verse, right? It doesn't happen right here, but that is partially the reason. The reason for us to, you want to add to it really quickly? No, go ahead. Great. Great. Fabulous. So I'm going to combine those two, but Mike Harris is going to say something first. Oh, interesting. Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm going to do those two comments, then we'll get to yours, Mike. So the idea that we needed to know that something happened in this particular place is not so that we could then spend many, many moments talking about the future of leadership or going into the emotional toll that this took on the people. That happens in a different part of our Torah, but rather because we needed a meaning for the different place that we had landed, right? So this idea that this wasn't just a place anymore. This was a place where something happened, that when we recall that which happened or that locale, we should know that was a place where Aaron died, right? It's going to bring us back to memories. I am sure that all of us have a space, a place that we visit, a specific restaurant or venue or something where if you think back to that, you're not just thinking about the location, you're thinking about what happened there, right? So that's why we needed to know this. It's important, and it's listed elsewhere in the Torah that Aaron died and how the people felt about it. But the reason that it's important in this particular moment in this parsha, in this itinerary I'm calling it, is because it's important for the people to know that, to Mike's point, we're getting to the end of a journey, and we also had meaning in this place to know how we were going to continue on. His death provided a marker for how this itinerary was coming quite literally to life and metaphorically to life. The last part of this parsha, that takes up quite a bit of the parsha, but I'm just bringing in a few verses, are these idea of arei miklat, of cities of refuge. And the reason I bring it in here, though, of course, this part of the Parsha could have a lot of sermons written about it and spoken about it. But the reason I'm bringing it up here is because it no longer was a journeying point. It was something to prepare for. It was something that the people had to actually create and prepare themselves while on the journey for the destination. So every other spot that we've spoken about so far and that we read about in the Parsha is a moment along the journey. Yes, Aaron dies in one of the places, and that's of special note. But then we get to this moment where we're being told as a people to, as soon as we cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, we shall provide ourselves with places to serve you as cities of refuge, which implies that we're stopping. This is where we're going to settle, and it also implies that people are going to make mistakes, which means that we're going to stay there for a while, right? That this isn't just going to be a moment along the journey. This is now going to be a place where we stay. So I want us to look at two commentaries about these three different pieces here, and I'm sorry we're doing this a little bit more quickly than I had intended, but hopefully you'll look at the other sources at another time. Look at the box here on the first page. The departures we learn from this, that the names of these places that are mentioned here are not the actual names that they had before. They are in fact the names that were given them as a result of the events that took place when Yisrael camped there. That, in my opinion, the writer of this commentary, is what was meant when Torah says, Moshe recorded all of the events that befell them on all of their journeys. That is why he mentioned afterwards the names of their encampments, because the names describe the events. So when we go on trips, maybe you just got back from the Beth trip, you saw an itinerary, you saw places, you saw that you were going somewhere that had a name. But I bet if you came back and you did the exercise of writing an itinerary based off of feelings and experiences and moments had, you wouldn't be naming the names of the place. You would give them names of those feelings or those moments. Because that's how we remember a trip that we've been on, or in this case, a journey for a long time. We're not going to remember every little city that we went to, but we are going to remember what we did, or who we met, or what we saw, or how we felt. And I'm not trying to say that's always good, by the way. Sometimes there are moments that are challenging, right? Which, of course, the people had as well. But that's how Moshe was recording these places. He was recording them based off of what happened, not what they were actually called. Yeah, Rabbi Losarelli.
I feel like there's a level of, I'm thinking of folks who are like street name people versus like landmark people.
Yeah.
You can be in New York and be like, okay, well, sorry for New Yorkers, but like 57th Street, some random street. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what 57th means.
Yeah.
But like, you could say like, oh, La Cienega, I know what's on La Cienega. Or when you're on a trip, I know sometimes it's like, we have our own personal landmarks. So like, oh, that's the ugly tree, or like that's Big Helmet Boy.
Sure.
Or like random things that we have in our lives.
Sure.
And like reminds us of like who we are, where we are, and why we're there.
Yeah, great.
Times we've been there.
Great. So just to repeat so everyone could hear, Rabbi Losarelli was just telling us that there are people who can remember streets, right, and where we are going based off a street name, but there are also people who name places based off of the landmark that is there, whether that's a tree or a gas station or a thing that I did in that building, and so I remember that it's at the corner of whatever streets it might be, but I remember that it's in this spot because I had an experience there. So I think that's exactly what's happening, is that instead of, because we, the readers of the Torah, don't need to know the street names, they weren't streets, but don't need to necessarily know how to find a place on a map. We want to know what the experience was of our people while going through this journey. That's what's important to us as a people reading back into our history. So they're destination people. They're not, or landmark people. They're not street name people. Exactly. Okay. We're going to skip all the other commentaries and go to the other box that's at the bottom here, just for time's sake. By the way, one of these sources does talk about how some of the names were given based off of things that weren't so great, right? That it doesn't have to just be that they were glad to arrive somewhere. Sometimes something was really difficult that they had to go through, and so they named it. Okay. This is what Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, I'm sorry that I forgot to put his name when I was editing this, said. But these are his words based off of a drash from Parshat Matot Maseh. We are all on a journey, and we must all rest from time to time. That dialectic between setting out and encamping, walking and standing still, is part of the rhythm of Jewish life. There is a time for nitzavim, for standing, and a time for vayelech, for moving on. Those are two names of two different parshiot. Rav Kook spoke of the two symbols in Bilam's blessing. How goodly are your tents, Jacob, and your dwelling places, Israel. Tents are for people on a journey. Dwelling places are for people who have found home. In life, there are journeys and encampments. Without the encampments, we suffer burnout. Without the journey, we do not grow. The late Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, Zichrono Livracha, once gave a beautiful shiur on Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, with its closing verse. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The poet is enchanted by the aesthetic beauty of the scene, the soft silence of the falling snow, the dark dignity of the tall trees. He would love to stay here in this timeless moment, this eternity in an hour. But he knows that life has an ethical dimension also, and this demands action, not just contemplation. The poet has stopped briefly to enjoy the dark wood and falling snow. He has encamped, But now, like the Israelites in Masseh, he must set out again. Hence the life-changing idea. Life is a journey, not a destination. We should never stand still. Instead, we should constantly set ourselves new challenges and take us out of our comfort zone. Life is growth. What I hope you got out of these three different parts in Parshat Masseh is that it is important for us to have itineraries. It's important for us to know an idea of where we might go, of what we might see, of places we might visit. But the end piece of that preparation of when we actually find ourselves somewhere is also important. It's important to recognize that the steps along the journey might be different than we expected them to be, but that once we arrive somewhere, it's important for us to take action there to protect ourselves, to protect our families, to protect our communities, to make sure that once we are established after that journey is over, that it's just the beginning of a different journey. It's not the end of the journeying, it's just the end of that itinerary. And so now that we've gotten to a destination, we have to recognize what's the next step, what's the next itinerary to build, and what are the next steps along our journey.